The burger was still warm when she grabbed it. Reed Ashford had looked away for exactly 4 seconds, just long enough to check his phone to see if any of his brothers had responded to his location ping. When he looked back, his plate was empty, and a skeletal figure was sprinting toward the dumpsters behind the roadside diner. He didn't yell, didn't curse. He simply stood up from the picnic table, leaving his coffee behind, and walked toward the dumpsters with the same measured pace he'd used on night patrols in Fallujah 17 years ago. He found her crouched behind a rusted green container, shoving the burger into her mouth so fast she was choking on it. Tears streamed down hollow cheeks that looked like they'd been carved from wax. Her whole body shook, but not from cold. This was something deeper. This was the trembling of someone who'd forgotten what safety felt like. "Hey," Reed said quietly. The girl's head snapped up. Her eyes, God, those eyes. They were the color of winter storms, gray and fierce and ancient. 13 years old, maybe 14, but those eyes had seen things that aged her beyond counting. They assessed him in a single sweep, head to toe, calculating threat level, escape routes, survival odds. Then she spoke. "Please don't call the police." The words came out garbled, muffled by food and fear. She swallowed hard, wincing like it hurt, and tried again. Her voice was stronger this time, steadier, not begging, negotiating. "Please don't call the police. I'll work it off. I can clean, I can carry things. I'm stronger than I look, I promise. Just please, Bon." Reed felt something crack inside his chest. He'd heard begging before. He'd heard men beg in combat zones, heard his own son beg the paramedics not to let him die after the drunk driver ran that red light 8 years ago. But this was different. This was a child who'd given up on being saved and was simply trying to negotiate the terms of her punishment. He lowered himself slowly to one knee, making himself smaller, less threatening. The girl flinched anyway, an automatic response so deeply ingrained it might as well have been written into her bones. "I'm not calling anyone," Reed said. "What's your name?" Her eyes darted left, right, mapping the alley in case she needed to run. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I just watched you inhale my dinner in about 6 seconds, and I'm curious whether I should order you another one or take you to a hospital." "I'm fine." "Kid, I've seen starving people before. You're not fine." She stiffened. Her chin came up, and for a moment Reed saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, pride, defiance. The stubborn refusal to be pitied by someone who couldn't possibly understand. "My name's Sloan," she finally said. "Sloan Thatcher." "Okay, Sloan, I'm Reed. People call me Reaper." He gestured toward the diner. "You want to sit down, I'll buy you an actual meal. Something you don't have to steal." Sloan's expression shifted. Suspicion flooded back sharp and cold. "Why? Why what? Why would you do that?" Her voice cracked. "Nobody does things for free. What do you want?" Reed felt his jaw tighten. Those words, that suspicion. This wasn't learned from watching movies or reading books. This was survival knowledge earned through experience no child should ever have. "I don't want anything," Reed said carefully. "I had a son. He died 8 years ago. He was about your age. And I think if he was out here starving, I'd want someone to buy him a burger." Sloan stared at him for a long moment, those ancient eyes searching his face for the lie, the trap, the hidden cost that always came with kindness. Whatever she saw, there must have passed some internal test because slowly, almost reluctantly, she nodded. They sat at the same picnic table where Reed had been eating alone. He ordered everything on the menu: burger, fries, onion rings, a chocolate shake, apple pie. The waitress raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, just wrote it down and disappeared back inside. When the food arrived, Sloan ate like she was afraid it would vanish. She crammed fries into her mouth 3 at a time, barely chewing before swallowing. Her hands trembled as she reached for the burger. Grease dripped down her chin. She didn't care. "Slow down," Reed said gently. "It's not going anywhere." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do, because I bought it and it's yours." Sloan paused a fry halfway to her mouth. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not exactly, but something close to it. Something like the first fragile crack in a wall that had taken years to build. "How long since you've eaten?" Reed asked. "What day is it? Saturday?" "Then Wednesday, I think." She took another bite of burger, her movements slightly slower now, more controlled. "Miss Margaret gave us crackers on Wednesday." Miss Margaret. Sloane's face went blank the moment the name left her mouth. The crack sealed shut instantly like a door slamming closed. Who's Miss Margaret? Nobody. Forget I said anything. Sloane started to stand. Thank you for the food. I'll pay you back. I can work. I'm strong even if I don't look like it. I can... Sit down. Reed didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Something in his tone, the same tone he'd used to command men under fire, made Sloane freeze mid-motion. Please, Reed added, softening. Just sit down, finish eating. Nobody's going to hurt you here. Sloane's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back furiously, angrily, like crying was a weakness she couldn't afford. You don't know that, she whispered. You don't know anything. Then tell me. The story came out in fragments. Bits and pieces scattered like broken glass. Sloane dropping them reluctantly, flinching every time she revealed too much. Stopping and starting like a car with a bad engine. Margaret Thornton. The foster home on rural Route 7. 23 months since Sloane had been placed there after her mother died of cancer and her father's whereabouts remained unknown. There are 47 of us, Sloane said, her voice barely audible. 4 houses. Miss Margaret runs all of them. Reed did the math in his head. 47 kids. Standard foster care payments averaged around $3,500 per child. That was over $160,000 a month. What does she spend the money on? He asked. Sloane laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound that didn't belong coming from a 13-year-old. Not us. What do you eat? Whatever she gives us, sometimes rice, sometimes bread. She made a face. Moldy bread, green spots all over it. She says we're being dramatic. Says kids in other countries have it worse. Says we should be grateful she keeps us at all. Reed's hands curled into fists under the table. He forced them to relax, forced his breathing to stay even. Getting angry wouldn't help, not yet. Sloane, when's the last time you saw a doctor? The girl looked at him blankly. A doctor? Yeah, for a checkup, shots, anything. I don't remember. Before Miss Margaret. Before Mom died. 23 months. 23 months without medical care for a growing child. 23 months of starvation rations and moldy bread and whatever abuse had taught this girl to flinch when adults moved too quickly. Does she hit you? Reed asked quietly. Sloane went very still. So still she might as well have been carved from stone. Sloane, she has a paddle, the girl whispered, drilled with holes so it swings faster. But that's not the bad part. Reed's blood ran cold. What's the bad part? Sloane's hands started shaking. She put down the fry she was holding like she couldn't eat anymore. Couldn't force food past the memories rising in her throat. The basement, she whispered. She calls it reflection time. When we break rules, she puts us down there. No food, no water, no bathroom. Just dark. How long depends on what we did wrong, she paused, swallowed hard. Longest I did was 4 days. Reed stopped breathing. 4 days. 4 days locked in a basement with no food, no water, no light. At 13 years old. And Sloane was saying it like it was normal, like it was just the way things were. How many kids has she put down there? Everyone, at least once. Sloane's voice cracked. But some don't come back up. What do you mean they don't come back up? Sloane's whole body was trembling now. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly, like she was trying to hold her own pieces together. There was this boy, Lucas. He was 10. He went down to the basement and... She stopped, swallowed, forced herself to continue. Miss Margaret said his heart was bad, said he died of natural causes. But Reed, he was fine, he was healthy, he was my friend. And 3 days after she put him down there, he was dead. Reed felt like he was going to be sick. When was this? 2 years ago, March. Were there others? Sloane nodded, a tiny terrified movement. 3 that I know of. But I've only been there 23 months. The older kids whisper about it. They say there were more before. The sun was starting to set. Reed had been sitting at this picnic table for almost 2 hours now, listening to horrors that made his combat experiences look tame. His coffee had gone cold. His hands hadn't stopped shaking since Sloane mentioned the basement. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Sloane looked at him with those ancient eyes. Because you asked. Nobody asks. Teachers don't ask. Social workers don't ask. Everyone looks at us and sees foster kids. Problem kids, liars. Her voice turned bitter. Miss Margaret says nobody believes foster kids because we're damaged. She says we could scream all we want and nobody would care. She's wrong. Is she? Sloane's jaw tightened. I told my caseworker once, 8 months ago, said I was hungry, said we weren't getting enough food. What happened? She told Miss Margaret. Sloane's voice broke. And Miss Margaret put me in the basement for 6 days, said I needed to learn about gratitude. Her hands were shaking now, gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. I almost died down there, Reed. I could feel myself slipping away. And when she finally let me out, she told me if I ever said anything again, she'd make sure I never came back up. Who's your caseworker? David Thornton, Miss Margaret's nephew. Reed sat back, a county official overseeing his own aunt's foster homes. No wonder reports disappeared. No wonder nothing ever changed. The corruption went all the way to the top. Sloane, I need to ask you something important. The girl tensed. Is there anyone in that basement right now? The silence that followed was the loudest thing Reed had ever heard. Sloane, her name is Grace. The words came out choked, broken. She's 9. She's been down there for 4 days because she cried during dinner. Reed was already reaching for his phone. She cried because she was hungry. Sloane continued, tears streaming down her face now. And Miss Margaret said crying wastes energy that could be used for work, so she needed to go reflect on her selfishness. Reed's finger hovered over the contact for Bishop Caldwell, president of the Steel Riders. She stopped screaming yesterday, Sloane whispered. I put my ear to the basement door, and I couldn't hear anything. Not crying, not talking, nothing. Her voice cracked completely. And I wanted to help her. I wanted to break down the door and save her. But I'm so weak, Reed. I'm so tired. I can barely walk most days. She looked up at him with devastated eyes. So I ran away, and I found this diner, and I stole your stupid burger because I thought maybe if I ate something, I'd be strong enough to go back and... Sloane. Reed gripped her shoulder gently. Look at me. She looked up. You did the right thing. You found someone who can help, and I'm going to help right now. How? Sloane's voice was desperate. Miss Margaret has everyone. The police chief goes to her church. The mayor's wife is her friend. She's on the county foster care board. She's untouchable. She's never dealt with people like me. Reed made the call at 7:47 p.m. 1 ring, 2, then a voice like gravel scraping concrete. Reaper, you're supposed to be on that memorial ride. Everything okay? No. Reed looked at Sloane, who was watching him with desperate hope, fighting against learned hopelessness. I need everyone, Bishop. Everyone you can get with if 500 miles. Right now. A pause. Talk to me. Reed told him all of it. The starving children, the basement, the dead boy named Lucas, the 9-year-old girl who had stopped screaming. When he finished, the silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 3 seconds. Where are you, Bam? Rusty's Diner, Rural Route 7, Cedar Falls, Wyoming. Stay there, don't move, don't call anyone else. Bishop's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I'm mobilizing Montana, Colorado, Nebraska, Idaho. We'll have 189 brothers there by midnight. Can you keep the girl safe until then? Reed looked at Sloane. 71 pounds of skin and bones and trauma, eating cold fries like they might be her last meal. Yeah, Reed said. I can keep her safe. Then that's your only job right now. We're coming. The line went dead. Reed put his phone down and turned back to Sloane. The girl was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Who were you talking to, a family? You have family. 217 brothers. And they're all about to make Miss Margaret Thornton very, very sorry. An hour later, Sloane said something that changed everything. They were still at the diner. Reed had ordered more food, convinced Sloane to drink some water slowly, and was trying to keep the girl calm while waiting for his brothers to arrive. There's something else, Sloane said quietly. Reed looked up. Something else. Sloane pulled a cracked iPhone from her pocket. Old battered, the screen splintered, but still functional. I found this in Miss Margaret's drawer 6 months ago. She never uses it, never checks it, so I started keeping it. Her hands were trembling. Just in case. Reed's pulse quickened. Just in case what? 3 weeks ago, I was hiding in the closet when she had a meeting with some people, other foster parents from different counties. Sloane's voice dropped to a whisper. They were talking about money, kids, how to make them disappear without anyone asking questions. She looked up at Reed with eyes that had seen too much. She called it aging out. Said some kiddos are worth more if they never reach 18. Said there are people who pay a lot of money for children who don't exist on paper anymore. Reed felt ice spread through his veins. Sloane, are you saying the kids who go to the basement and don't come back? I don't think they all died, Sloane whispered. But she didn't say it like someone sharing information. She said it like someone who'd been carrying this weight for months, analyzing it, planning around it. Like someone who'd been preparing for exactly this moment. Reed's hands were shaking as Sloane pulled up the recording. How long have you been gathering evidence? Sloane met his eyes, those ancient, calculating eyes that belonged to a strategist, not a victim. 6 months, she said simply. Since I found the phone, I've recorded 47 conversations, documented meal schedules, photographed bruises, kept a journal of every child who went to the basement and every child who came back. She held up the phone. I learned it from Miss Margaret. She keeps records of everything. So do I. Reed stared at this 71-pound, 13-year-old girl who just revealed she'd been running a covert intelligence operation for half a year while being starved and beaten. Who'd been strategic enough to hide evidence, patient enough to wait for the right moment, smart enough to recognize that she needed someone outside the system to act on what she'd found. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I needed to know you were real first. Sloane's voice was steady now, certain. Miss Margaret taught me that everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. I needed to see what you wanted. And what do I want? To protect kids who can't protect themselves, she paused. Because you couldn't protect your son. Reed felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Sloane's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry about Jackson, but that's why you'll help me. Not because you pity me, but because you need this as much as I do. She was right. This 71-pound girl had read him completely in less than 3 hours. The recording, Reed said, his voice rough. Play it. The audio played for 11 minutes. Reed listened with his jaw locked so tight he thought his teeth might crack. Margaret Thornton's voice came through clear as crystal. Cheerful, businesslike, discussing children like they were inventoried at a warehouse liquidation. The younger ones are worth more, obviously, but you can't move too many at once. People notice, better to space it out. 1 or 2 a year tops. Another voice, female, unfamiliar. What about paperwork? David handles that. Death certificates are easy when you know the right coroner. And runaways, nobody looks twice at a runaway foster kid. They assume drugs, streets, the usual. By the time anyone asks questions, the kid's 3 states away. A third voicemail calculating how much are we talking depends on the buyer. Young, healthy, compliant, 50,000, sometimes more. Reed stopped the recording. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. Sloane was watching him carefully, not crying, not breaking down, analyzing his reaction like a scientist observing an experiment. How many? Reed asked, his voice barely controlled. I don't know. Maybe 10, maybe more. The older kids whisper about it, but nobody knows for sure. Sloane paused. We're all too scared to count. Reed stood up abruptly, walked 3 steps away, pressed his hands against his face and breathed deep. Once, twice. Let the red tide of rage ebb back just enough that he could think clearly. This wasn't just abuse. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was trafficking. Children were being sold, and the system designed to protect them was complicit in their sale. His phone buzzed, a text from Bishop. 67 brothers already en route. ETA 11 p.m. FBI contact notified. Hold your position. Reed typed back, it's worse than we thought. She's selling them. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then Bishop's response came through. Then we burn it all down. Legal clean complete. Every single person involved. Reed turned back to Sloane. The girl was eating again methodically now, like someone who'd learned to conserve energy, but her eyes never left him. I need your motorcycle club, Sloan said quietly. Not to save me. I've been saving myself for 6 months. I need them to save the others. The ones who don't have phones, the ones who can't hide evidence, the ones who are too young or too broken or too scared. She set down her fork. I have a plan. I know the layout of all 4 houses. I know how many kids are in each location. I know Margaret's patterns, her connections, her security. I've been watching for 23 months while everyone thought I was just another broken foster kid. Sloan pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It was covered in pencil markings, maps, schedules, names, a tactical briefing drawn by a 13-year-old who'd been conducting reconnaissance in hell. We get Grace first, she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. She's been down there 4 days. That's the limit before organ failure starts. Then we hit all 4 houses simultaneously. Margaret will try to call her nephew, her police chief friend, her church connections. We need to move faster than her phone tree. She looked up at Reed. I can't break down a basement door. I weigh 71 pounds. But you can. That's why I needed you. Not to rescue me, to execute my plan. Reed felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't a victim waiting to be saved. This was a survivor who'd been waiting for the right tactical support to launch an operation she'd been planning for months. Show me everything you have, Reed said. Sloan smiled. It was small and fierce and utterly unbroken. I thought you'd never ask. At 10:30 p.m., the first motorcycles arrived, 27 bikes from the Colorado chapter rolling into the diner parking lot in formation. Engines died almost in unison. Men in leather vests stepped off their bikes and walked toward Reed without a word. Knox, 6'5", 300 pounds, a former defensive lineman, who'd found the club after a career-ending injury, reached Reed first. Where's the girl? Reed nodded toward the diner window where Sloan was visible at their table, studying her maps like a general planning an invasion. 71 pounds, Knox said quietly, looking at her. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. How can it possibly get worse? Reed showed him the phone, played 30 seconds of the recording. Knox's face went from shock to something colder, something dangerous. How many others know? Bishop's bringing everyone. You're the advanced team. Good. Knox cracked his knuckles. How do you want to handle this? By the book, evidence collection, witness statements, federal involvement. These people walk free if we do anything that gives them a loophole. And the kids? There might be one dying in a basement right now. A 9-year-old girl, 4 days without food or water. Knox closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. Then we move tonight. We wait for Bishop. We need everyone coordinated. Reed's jaw tightened. The girl Sloan, she has intelligence on multiple locations. Other foster homes, other operators. We have to hit them all at once or they warn each other. And if Grace dies while we're waiting, Reed didn't answer, couldn't answer. By 11:15 p.m., the parking lot was full. 108 motorcycles, more coming every minute. Men from 4 states dropping everything, jobs, family, sleep, because a 13-year-old girl had stolen a burger and whispered the words that changed everything. Bishop Caldwell arrived at 11:47, 63 years old, white beard, reading glasses. He looked more like a retired accountant than the president of a motorcycle club. But his eyes told a different story. Those eyes had seen things, done things. And right now they were focused entirely on the diner window where Sloan sat. That's her, Bishop asked. Reed nodded. She's brave, talking like this. Most kids would be too scared. She's not brave, she's tactical. Reed pulled out this map Sloan had drawn. She's been planning this for 6 months, gathering evidence, documenting patterns. She's not looking for rescue. She's looking for tactical support to execute an operation. Bishop studied the maps. His eyebrows rose. This is military-grade reconnaissance. From a 13-year-old girl who weighs 71 pounds. Bishop was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to face the assembled brothers. 189 men standing in the cold Wyoming night, waiting for orders. Listen up, Bishop said, his voice carrying without shouting. In approximately 6 hours, we're going to dismantle a child trafficking operation that's been running for at least 7 years under the protection of corrupt officials. We're going to do it legally, carefully, and completely. No one walks. No evidence gets lost. No loopholes. He paused. There are 47 children in 4 houses. Most of them have never known what it feels like to be safe. Tonight we change that. Tonight they meet their new family. A murmur ran through the crowd, not of dissent, of agreement, of commitment. But first, Westa, Bishop's voice hardened. There's a 9-year-old girl who's been locked in a basement for 4 days. She may already be dead. If she's not, she's dying. We're not waiting until morning to find out. He looked at Reed. Reaper, you and Knox take a team. 10 men. Get to the main house. Get that girl out. Document everything. We'll coordinate with the FBI for the full operation, but that child cannot wait another hour. Reed nodded. And the witness, Sloan? She stays here with me. Protected. Bishop's voice took on an edge of steel. When this is over, she's going to testify against every single person who hurt her. And I'm going to personally guarantee that no one touches her ever again. Sloan was standing at their table when Reed came back inside. She'd been listening somehow. Or maybe she'd just known how this would play out. You're going to get Grace, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah. I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Sloane's voice was flat. Absolute. Grace has been down there 4 days. She's 9 years old. When you open that door, she's going to see a 300-pound man she's never met, and she's going to think Margaret sent someone to finish her off. Sloane stepped closer. But if she sees me, she'll know someone kept their promise. She'll know she wasn't forgotten. Reed looked at this 71-pound girl who'd survived 23 months of hell and spent 6 months planning her own rescue operation. Who'd learned to think tactically in an environment designed to break her? Who understood psychology and trauma and what a dying child would need to see in that moment? You stay behind me, Reed said finally. You don't enter until I've secured the location. You follow every order I give without question. Understood. Sloane nodded. One more thing. Reed reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver chain. A St. Christopher medal that had belonged to Jackson. He'd worn it every day for 8 years, never taken it off. He placed it in Sloane's palm. Hold on to this for me. I'll need it back. So yeah, I'm coming back. Sloane stared at the medal, then back at Reed. People always break promises, she said quietly. Not me, not tonight, not ever. Something shifted in Sloane's expression. Not trust exactly, but something close to it. Something like the beginning of hope. She closed her hand around the medal. "'Kay," she whispered. "'Kay." 11 motorcycles rolled out at 12:03 a.m. Reed led, Knox beside him, 9 brothers behind, and Sloane wrapped in a leather jacket 3 sizes too big, holding on to Reed's waist as they rode through the darkness toward rural Route 7. They rode without headlights for the last mile, engines barely above idle, navigating by moonlight. The house sat at the end of a gravel driveway surrounded by empty fields. No neighbors, no witnesses. The perfect place to make children disappear. Lights were off. The building looked dead. But somewhere beneath it, a 9-year-old girl was either dying or already gone. Reed killed his engine. The others followed. In the silence that followed, he heard something. Faint. Barely there. A sound coming from below the house. Not crying, not screaming. Tapping. Weak, irregular tapping, like someone hitting a wall with the last of their strength. Grace was still alive. For now. The tapping stopped. Reed froze his hand on the basement door, his heart hammering against his ribs. For 3 agonizing seconds there was nothing. Just silence. Just the cold Wyoming night pressing down on them like a weight. Then it came again. Weaker this time. Slower. Tap, tap, tap. "She's alive," Knox breathed beside him. "Go," Sloane whispered from behind Reed. "Now, please." Reed pulled the door. Locked. He stepped back. Knox stepped forward. 300 pounds of muscle and fury slamming into the wood. The frame splintered. The door crashed inward. A staircase descended into absolute darkness. The smell hit Reed first. Urine, feces, something else underneath. Something metallic. Fear. 23 months of children's fear soaked into the concrete walls. He pulled out his flashlight and descended. "Grace," His voice echoed off the walls. Grace, can you hear me? My name is Reed. I'm here to help you. Silence. Then from the far corner, a sound that broke him. A whimper, small, terrified. The sound of a child who had given up hope so completely that the possibility of rescue was more frightening than the darkness itself. Reed swept his flashlight across the basement. Bare concrete. A single drain in the center of the floor. No bed, no blankets, no toilet. Just a small figure curled in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, face buried, rocking back and forth. Grace, Reed crouched down, keeping his distance, making himself small. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. Sloan sent me. The rocking stopped. Sloan? The voice was a rasp, barely human. 4 days without water had destroyed it. Yeah, Sloan, she's safe now, and I'm going to make you safe too. Grace lifted her head. Even in the dim light, Reed could see the devastation. Cracked lips, sunken eyes, cheekbones jutting out like knives beneath paper-thin skin. She was 9 years old and she looked like a ghost. Behind him, Sloan's voice came from the top of the stairs. Grace, it's me. It's Sloan. I'm here. Grace's head snapped toward the sound. Sloan, her voice cracked. But they said you ran away. They said you were never coming back. I didn't run away. Sloan was crying now. Reed could hear it in her voice. I went for help, just like I promised I would. Remember, I promised I wouldn't leave you. Grace stared up at the stairs where Sloan's silhouette was backlit by moonlight. Then she did something that shattered Reed completely. She smiled, a broken, fragile smile from a 9-year-old who'd been 4 days in hell and had just learned that someone had kept their promise. You came back, Grace whispered. I always come back, Sloan said. And in that moment, Reed understood something fundamental about the girl he'd found behind a dumpster eating a stolen burger. Sloan Thatcher wasn't a victim who'd gotten lucky. She was a warrior who'd been planning her counterattack for 6 months. And tonight, the war began. Grace could barely walk. Knox lifted her like she weighed nothing, which wasn't far from the truth. 40 pounds of dehydration and starvation wrapped in skin that looked like parchment. She kept her arms around Sloan's neck, refusing to let go even when the medics tried to examine her. I'm not leaving, Sloan said firmly when one of the EMTs suggested separating them. She stays with me until she says otherwise. The EMT looked at Reed. Reed looked at Grace's grip on Sloan's jacket, the way the 9-year-old's whole body relaxed slightly whenever Sloan spoke. She stays, Reed confirmed. They were loading Grace into the ambulance when the front door of the house opened. Margaret Thornton stood on her porch in a floral bathrobe, hair in curlers, a cup of tea steaming in her hands. She looked like someone's grandmother, like a woman who baked cookies and went to church and pinched children's cheeks with affection. She was smiling. Can I help you, gentlemen? Her voice was warm, concerned, perfectly calibrated. It's quite late. Is there an emergency? Knox stepped forward, but Sloan was faster. The girl walked right up to the porch steps, Grace still clinging to her, and looked Margaret Thornton directly in the eyes. We found her, Sloan said quietly. Grace, in your basement, 4 days without food or water. She weighs about 40 pounds. She can barely speak. Margaret's smile didn't waver, not even for a second. Oh, Grace. Yes, poor dear has some behavioral issues. We've been working with her therapist on stop. The word came out cold, flat, dangerous. Margaret blinked. The smile flickered. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I don't think you understand. I said stop. Sloane's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Don't talk. Don't explain. Don't spin. I've been recording you for 6 months, Margaret. Every meeting, every conversation about selling children, every lie you told about kids who disappeared. She held up the cracked iPhone. I have 47 recordings, financial records I've photographed from your safe, documentation of every child you put in that basement and every child who didn't come back up. Margaret's mask cracked, her face contorted not with fear but with rage. You ungrateful little... She caught herself, forced the smile back. Sloan, darling, you're confused. You've been through trauma, and sometimes traumatized children create... Agent Victoria Brennan of the FBI is about 15 minutes out, Reed said, stepping up beside Sloan. She's been building cases against operations like yours for 6 years. You're going to make her career, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. For the first time, Margaret's mask shattered completely. Do you know who my nephew is? She hissed. Do you know how many people in this county owe me favors? I'll have you arrested for trespassing. I'll have you charged with kidnapping. You'll shut up and put your hands, I can see them. The voice came from behind Reed, a woman's voice. Calm, professional, absolutely authoritative. Agent Victoria Brennan stepped into the porch light, FBI badge in one hand, weapon in the other. Two more agents flanked her. Margaret Ann Thornton. Brennan said, "You're under arrest for child abuse, child endangerment, human trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." Margaret screamed, not words, just raw animal fury. She lunged at Brennan, teacup flying fingernails aimed at the agent's face. One of the other agents caught her, spun her around, forced her to her knees. The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. "My nephew will hear about this," Margaret shrieked. "David will have all of you fired. You can't do this. Those children are mine. The state gave them to me." Brennan crouched down to Margaret's eye level on. "Your nephew was arrested 20 minutes ago, along with the county coroner who falsified death certificates for you, and the police sergeant who buried complaints, and your husband who we found trying to destroy hard drives at your second property." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your network is done, Mrs. Thornton, every single piece of it." Margaret went pale. The screaming stopped. For the first time, Reed saw real fear in her eyes. Sloan watched them load Margaret into the federal vehicle. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just a cold, heavy certainty that this was only the beginning. "Where's the second house?" Brennan asked, turning to Sloan. Sloan didn't hesitate. She pulled out her hand-drawn maps. Sagebrush Trail, 23 children, 2 adults on site. Charlotte Winters is the oldest, 15. She's been there 5 years. She knows where Margaret keeps the records. Brennan stared at the maps. Professional quality tactical layouts drawn in pencil by a 13-year-old. "How did you—" I watched," Sloan said simply. "For 23 months, everyone thought I was broken. So they stopped paying attention. They talked around me like I was furniture. Margaret held meetings in the house while I cleaned. I listened. I learned. I documented." She handed Brennan a USB drive. "This has copies of everything, all 47 recordings, photos of the safe contents, financial records, names of the other operators in Margaret's network." "Other operators?" "Margaret didn't work alone." Sloan's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. "She had monthly meetings with foster parents from other counties. They called us inventory, discussed pricing demand, how to make us disappear without triggering investigations." Brennan's face went ashen. "How many locations are we talking about?" Sloan looked at Reed, then back to Brennan. 37 foster operations across 6 states. I have addresses for 11 of them. The rest are mentioned in the recordings, but I couldn't get exact locations." The silence that followed was absolute. 37, Brennan finally said. Said that. Her voice was hollow. "You're telling me there are 37 more operations like this? At minimum." Sloan's jaw tightened. "Margaret's been doing this for 7 years. The older kids whisper about operations that close down operators who move to different states. This isn't one woman. It's a system." Bishop had been standing quietly to the side listening. Now he stepped forward. "We can hit them all," he said. "Tonight. Every location simultaneously. We've got 423 brothers mobilized across 6 states. You give us the addresses, we coordinate entry times, secure the children before anyone can destroy evidence or run." Brennan shook her head. "That's not how this works. We need warrants coordination with multiple field offices, jurisdictional approvals." "Which takes weeks," Sloan interrupted. "And the moment word gets out that Margaret was arrested, they'll scatter. Destroy records. Move the kids. Some of them will disappear permanently." She stepped closer to Brennan. "How many children are you willing to lose while you wait for paperwork?" Brennan stared at this 71-pound girl who just delivered the most devastating question she'd ever heard. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Sloan's voice was quiet, absolute. You can play by rules designed to protect people who abuse the system, or you can protect the children trapped in the system. You can't do both, not tonight. Reed watched something shift in Brennan's expression. The agent looked at Sloan, then at Grace still clinging to her, then at the house where a 9-year-old had been left to die in a basement. "Give me 30 minutes, Brennan said, pulling out her phone. "I'll make calls. Emergency authorizations. If I can get approval for simultaneous operations." "You have 20 minutes, Sloan said. Grace was in that basement 4 days. The timeline from dehydration to organ failure is 5 to 7 days. If there are other children locked up right now, we're already at the edge of the survivability window." Brennan made the calls. Sloan turned to Bishop and pulled out a second set of maps, more detailed than the first, color-coded by priority. "Red locations have basement lockups like Margaret's," she explained. "They're the most urgent. Yellow locations use starvation and isolation, but no confinement. Still dangerous, but lower immediate mortality risk. Green locations I don't have enough of intel on, but Margaret's ledger shows regular payments." Bishop studied the maps with the eye of a military strategist. "You did all this yourself?" "I had 6 months and nothing else to do." Sloane's voice was flat. "Margaret thought giving us chores would keep us compliant. She didn't realize she was giving me access to every room in the house. I photographed documents while dusting, recorded conversations while mopping, memorized schedules while cooking." She pointed to a notation on one map. "This location in Idaho, the operator is Barbara Hayes, 57 years old. She has a 12-year operational history longer than Margaret. The recording suggests she's the one who taught Margaret the trafficking protocols." "Taught her?" Reed asked. Sloan nodded. "Margaret was a foster kid herself 30 years ago. Barbara Hayes was her foster mother. This is generational. Barbara recruited Margaret. Margaret was recruiting others. It's a pyramid." The implications settled over them like a weight. "How far up does it go?" Bishop asked quietly. Sloan pulled out one more recording on the phone. Her hand was shaking slightly as she pressed play. A male voice came through, refined, educated, the voice of someone used to giving orders. "The Wyoming operation is clean, but I'm concerned about the Montana expansion. Too many children in too short a time draws attention." Margaret's voice responded, "Senator, with respect, the demand is, I don't care about demand, I care about exposure. Do you understand what happens to me if this gets out? I've spent 23 years building my career. I chair the Committee on Health and Human Services. I oversee foster care legislation for half the country." Sloan stopped the recording. "That's Senator Harrison Vale," she said. "He's not just connected to the network. He's running it." The second house on Sagebrush Trail yielded 23 more children. Same conditions, same starvation, same fear. But also something else. Charlotte Winters, 15 years old, 5 feet 6 inches, maybe 90 pounds. She'd been at Margaret's the longest, since she was 10, and she'd learned the same lessons Sloan had learned. How to watch, how to wait, how to survive by becoming invisible. She was sitting on the porch steps when the Steel Riders arrived, watching the chaos with dead eyes. "You're too late," Charlotte said when Sloan approached her. "Whatever you think you're going to fix, you're too late. We got Margaret. She's in custody." "So what?" Charlotte's voice was bitter. "There are others. There are always others." "We're going to find them all," Charlotte laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You don't understand. This isn't about one woman. This isn't about one county. This is everywhere, every state, every system. Kids like us, we're invisible. We're dollar signs. We're bodies to be used until we're used up." Sloan sat down beside her on the steps. "What do you know, Charlotte? I know she had meetings once a month, other foster parents from other places. They'd sit in her living room and talk about inventory. That's what they called us, inventory." Charlotte's voice cracked. "I know she had a list. Names and addresses. I saw it once when I was cleaning her office. Places in Montana, Idaho, Colorado, all running the same operation. Where's the list now?" "She keeps it in a safe behind the painting of Jesus in her bedroom." 20 minutes later, they had the safe open. Inside were 3 things that would change everything. Cash, nearly $60,000 in bundled hundreds. Money that should have fed and clothed 47 children. A ledger, handwritten, names, dates, amounts. A record of every transaction Margaret had ever made, every child sold, every payment received, and a list. Not 11 names. 37. 37 foster operations in 6 states: Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Nevada, Utah. Each entry included an address, an operator name, and a number. The number of children in the operation. Sloan did the math in her head while Brennan photographed every page. 417 children. 417 kids being starved, beaten, neglected, and in some cases sold across 6 states. Margaret Thornton wasn't an aberration. She was a franchise. "We need to move tonight," Bishop said, looking at the list, "before word spreads." Brennan was on the phone with someone, her voice tight with controlled urgency. When she hung up, her expression was grim. "I got an authorization for emergency operations, simultaneous raids across all 6 states. But what?" Sloan asked. "We just got a report from our Idaho field office. Barbara Hayes in Twin Falls, one of the operators on your list." "What about her?" "Someone tipped her off. Maybe police scanner, maybe a contact in law enforcement. She saw our team approaching." Brennan paused. "She's barricaded herself inside with 6 children. She has a shotgun and what she claims is a dead man's switch connected to propane tanks in the basement." Reed felt his blood go cold. "Hostage situation. She's threatening to kill them all before she lets anyone take them. Says she'd rather they die free than live as witnesses." Sloan stood up abruptly. "I'm going to Idaho." "Absolutely not," Brennan said. You're a child witness. You belong in protective custody, not..." "I'm the only person who can talk her down." "Sloan, this is a trained professional with a weapon and 6 lives in her hands. The FBI has negotiators. 2 hours away minimum." Sloan's voice cut through the protest like a blade. "You said it yourself. Barbara was Margaret's foster mother 30 years ago. She's a former foster kid who became a trafficker. She thinks she's saving children from the system by selling them." Sloan stepped closer to Brennan. "I know exactly what she's thinking because I've heard it before. Margaret used the same justification. Better a good home with buyers who want them than aging out homeless. It's a twisted savior complex built on trauma." She paused. "Your negotiators will try to reason with her like she's a criminal. But she doesn't think she's a criminal. She thinks she's a martyr. And martyrs don't surrender. They make statements." Reed saw where this was going. "If she's going to kill those kids, she'll do it before your team can breach. The only chance is talking her down from the inside. And the only person who can do that is someone who understands her psychology from lived experience," Sloan finished. "Someone who survived what she thinks she's protecting children from." Brennan stared at Sloan for a long moment. "You're 13 years old. I'm a survivor who's been conducting intelligence operations for 6 months. I've negotiated my own survival every day for 23 months. I've studied the psychology of every adult in Margaret's network." Sloan's voice was steady, certain. "Barbara Hayes thinks killing those children is mercy. I can show her it's murder. But only if you let me try Mo." The ride to Twin Falls took 3 hours. Reed drove, Oshuram. Sloan rode behind him, arms around his waist, the St. Christopher medal cold against her chest where she tucked it under her shirt. They didn't talk. There was nothing to say. Bishop had sent Knox and 8 others as backup. Brennan was coordinating from Cedar Falls, managing the other 36 simultaneous operations. But this hostage situation in Idaho, this was Sloan's play. They reached the perimeter at 5:43 a.m. The property was surrounded, FBI vehicles, local police, a helicopter circling overhead, spotlight cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. And in the center of it all, a farmhouse with boarded windows and a woman inside who had decided that dead children were better than rescued ones. Reed ditched his bike and walked toward the perimeter. An agent tried to stop him. "Sir, this is an active scene." "I'm with Brennan. Caller." The agent hesitated, made a call, listened. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion to something like respect. "She says you're cleared. But she also says if you get anyone killed, she'll arrest you herself." "Fair enough." Reed moved through the perimeter until he found the incident commander, a tired-looking man in his 50s, FBI windbreaker radio in hand. "You're the biker Brennan mentioned." "Yeah, and this is a Sloan Thatcher. She's going to talk Barbara down." The commander looked at Sloan, 71 pounds of determination wrapped in a leather jacket. With all due respect, this is a trained professional with a weapon and 6 lives in her hands. We have negotiators en route. How long? Hour and a half, maybe 2. Those children don't have 2 hours, Sloan said quietly. What's the current status? The commander studied her for a moment. Then he made a decision. Barbara Hayes, 57, ran a foster operation here for 12 years. When our team approached, she grabbed 6 kids and locked herself in the back bedroom. Shotgun and claimed dead man switch to propane. Is the switch real? We don't know. Could be a bluff, could be real. If we breach and she's telling the truth, the whole house goes up. Has she made demands? Just one. She wants to talk to someone who understands. Sloan nodded slowly. Get me on the radio. The commander handed her the radio. Sloan held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it. 6 lives balanced on whatever she said in the next few minutes. She clicked the button. Barbara, my name is Sloan Thatcher. I'm 13 years old. I weigh 71 pounds. And I spent the last 23 months at Margaret Thornton's foster home in Wyoming. Static. Then a voice. Tight. Controlled. The voice of someone holding themselves together by willpower alone. I know who you are. You're the one who took Margaret. You're the one destroying everything we built. I found children locked in a basement, starving, beaten, sold. Sloan kept her voice calm. Is that what you built? We saved them. The certainty in Barbara's voice was terrifying. Do you know what happens to foster kids in the regular system? They get shuffled from home to home until they age out. They end up on streets, on drugs, dead before they're 25. We gave them purpose. You gave them to buyers for $50,000 each. Silence. I've heard the recordings, Barbara. Margaret kept records, names, dates, prices. 37 children sold like cattle. Is that salvation? Those children went to better homes. Barbara's voice was cracking now. To people who wanted them, who valued them. Valued them for what? The silence stretched longer this time. Sloan pressed on. Barbara, I've got 47 kids in my protection right now. Kids who told me about the paddle. Kids who told me about the basement. Kids who told me about friends who disappeared in the middle of the night and never came back. She paused. That's not rescue, that's trafficking. And deep down, you know it. You don't understand. Barbara's voice was fracturing at the edges. I was one of them. 30 years ago, I was a foster kid too. I know what the system does. I know how it breaks you. I thought, the voice broke completely. I thought if I could just control the process, I could choose where they went. I could make sure they were safe. You could sell them to the highest bidder and tell yourself it was mercy. Barbara started crying. Sloan could hear it through the radio, great heaving sobs that shook her voice into pieces. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started small. One child, one buyer who seemed legitimate, and then the money was so good. And Margaret used you, Sloan said quietly, just like she used everyone else. You were a cog in her machine, Barbara. Nothing more. She softened her voice. And now you're sitting in a house with 6 children holding a gun, telling yourself that killing them is somehow noble. They'll testify, Barbara whispered. They'll tell everyone what I did. I'll spend the rest of my life in prison. Yes, you will. That's the consequence of what you chose. Sloan took a breath. But those 6 kids in that room with you, they didn't choose any of this. They're not responsible for your crimes. And they don't deserve to deed because you're scared of what comes next. I can't go to prison. I can't. You don't understand what they do to people like me in prison. You're right, I don't. Sloan's voice was steady. But I know what happens to kids who watch adults give up. They spend the rest of their lives believing they weren't worth fighting for, worth living for. She paused. Don't make those 6 children spend their lives knowing that the last thing you did was quit. The silence on the other end lasted 30 seconds, 40, 50. Then Barbara's voice came through small and broken. I don't know how to come back from this. You walk out the front door. You put down the gun. You let those kids go. Sloan's voice was gentle now. And then you tell Agent Brennan everything, every name at every buyer, every location. You become the person who helps us find the children who were sold. That doesn't erase what I did. No, but it might save some lives. And that's worth something. Another long silence. Will you be there when I come out? I'll be right here. Promise. Sloan looked at Reed, who nodded. I promise. The line went dead. Everyone on the perimeter held their breath. Weapons raised, hearts pounding. The door opened. 6 children came out first, one by one, blinking in the early morning light. A girl who couldn't have been more than 5. A boy, maybe 12, carrying a toddler. 3 others between clustered together like a flock of terrified birds. Then Barbara Hayes, hands empty, face streaked with tears, walking towards Sloan like she was sleepwalking. I'm sorry, she whispered as they cuffed her. I'm so sorry. Sloan didn't respond because the 5-year-old girl had broken away from the group and thrown herself against Sloan's legs, clutching her with arms that were nothing but bone. Are you going to take us somewhere safe? The girl asked, looking up with eyes too big for her face. Miss Barbara said safe doesn't exist, but you're here, so maybe she was wrong. Sloan knelt down. She thought about Grace, about Charlotte, about the 47 kids who were finally free. Safe exists, she said. I'm going to show you. The girl nodded, then she smiled. By 7 a.m., all 37 locations had been secured. The call came through on Brennan's phone while Sloan was sitting on the curb outside the Twin Falls farmhouse, watching EMTs load the rescued children into ambulances. We got them all, Brennan said. Her voice was thick with exhaustion and something else. Relief, maybe. Every single location. Every single operator. Sloan felt something loosen in her chest that had been coiled tight for 6 months. How many children? 127 total. Sloan closed her eyes. 127 kids who had been starving, beaten, neglected. Some of them, the files suggested at least 43, according to Margaret's ledger, had been sold to buyers whose identities were still being traced. It's not over, Sloan said quietly. I know. The 43 who were sold, we need to find them. We're working on it. The buyer network it's bigger than we thought. How big? Brennan was quiet for a moment. International connections, shell companies. This goes deep, Sloan, really deep. Senator Vale? Yeah, and probably others. People with resources, people who can make problems disappear. Sloan looked at the farmhouse, at the ambulance, pulling away at the men in leather vests who had ridden through the night to make this happen. Let them try, she said. We're not going anywhere. Reed sat down beside her on the curb. He didn't say anything, just sat there in the morning light, while emergency vehicles moved around them like a choreographed dance. You did good today, he finally said. We did good. Sloan pulled out the St. Christopher medal, held it up so it caught the sunrise. You taught me something, Reed. What's that? That keeping promises matters more than anything else. She handed him the medal. Thank you for keeping yours. Reed took the medal but then pressed it back into her palm. Keep it, he said. Jackson would have wanted you to have it. And besides, you're going to need it. For what? For what comes next? Taking down a senator, finding the 43 who are still missing, building a system that actually protects kids instead of selling them. He looked at her. This was the rescue, Sloan. Now comes the war. Sloan closed her hand around the medal. Then we'd better get ready. Bishop walked over, phone in his hand. That was Brennan, he said. She found something in Margaret's files. A video, recorded 3 months ago. What kind of video? Margaret meeting with Senator Vale, discussing the network, expansion plans, talking about you specifically. Sloan felt ice spread through her veins. What did they say? Bishop's expression was grim. Vale asked if you were a problem, asked if you'd been asking too many questions. He paused. Margaret told him you were just a 70-pound kid, that nobody listens to foster kids anyway, that you were completely under control. Sloan stood up. Do we have a copy of this video? Yeah. On the USB drive you gave Brennan. She didn't realize what it was until she went through all the files. Then we use it, we leak it, we make it impossible for Vale to bury. Reed shook his head. If we release that video before formal charges are filed, defense attorneys will argue tainted evidence. He could walk. Or, Sloan said slowly, we make it so public that the FBI has to act. Force their hand before Vale can use his connections to make it disappear. She looked at Bishop. How many people follow the Steel Riders on social media? About 500,000 across all chapters. And how fast can something go viral if 500,000 people share it simultaneously? Bishop's eyes widened. You want to weaponize social media against a sitting senator. I want to make sure he can't make this go away. Sloane's voice was hard. Margaret asked what a 70-pound girl could do. Senator Vale is about to find out. The sun was fully up now. The farmhouse was empty. The children were safe, but somewhere 63 kids were still missing, still trapped, still waiting for someone to find them. And in Washington, D.C., a senator who'd built his career on protecting children was waking up to a day that would destroy everything he'd built. Because a 13-year-old girl who weighed 71 pounds had decided that enough was enough. The war was just beginning. The video was uploaded at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Not to the FBI, not to traditional media. Sloane made a different choice. She sat in Bishop's office in Cedar Falls, the cracked iPhone in her hands, and recorded a response. 30 seconds of a 13-year-old girl, 71 pounds, looking directly into the camera with eyes that had survived hell. My name is Sloane Catherine Thatcher. 3 months ago, Senator Harrison Vale asked Miss Margaret Thornton if I was a problem. If I'd been asking too many questions about where children were disappearing to. She paused. Miss Margaret told him I was just a 70-pound kid, that nobody listens to foster kids, that I was completely under control. Sloane leaned closer to the camera. Senator Vale, I'm going to show you exactly what a 70-pound girl can do when you underestimate her. She pressed play on Margaret's recording. 30 seconds of audio. Vale's voice clear as crystal, discussing expansion plans for a child trafficking network like he was reviewing quarterly earnings. Then Sloane's face filled the frame again. I was inventory to you, a commodity, a problem to be managed. Her voice was steady, absolutely certain. Tomorrow I'll be your judge. The video was 90 seconds long. Bishop uploaded it simultaneously to every Steel Riders chapter's social media account. 423 chapters, 500,000 followers. Within an hour, it had been viewed 2 million times. Within 3 hours, major news networks were running breaking coverage. Within 6 hours, Senator Harrison Vale's office released a statement calling the video a sophisticated deepfake created by political enemies attempting to sabotage his re-election campaign. By morning, the FBI announced an emergency investigation. By noon, Vale's house was surrounded by federal vehicles. By evening, he was in handcuffs. Sloane watched the arrest on television from the safe house where Brennan had relocated her room. Charlotte sat beside her. Grace was curled up asleep in Charlotte's lap, finally allowing herself to rest with people she trusted. That's him, Charlotte whispered as they showed Vale being led to a waiting car. Silver hair perfectly styled, even in custody. Expensive suit. The face of a man who'd spent 23 years convincing America he protected children. That's the man from the video. Yeah, that's him. Sloane felt Reed's hand on her shoulder. He'd been standing behind the couch watching silently. Is it really over? Charlotte asked. The arrest is over, Sloane said quietly. The trial comes next. We might have to testify. Both of us. I know. Charlotte's jaw tightened. He bought children. He let Margaret hurt us. He sat in his office voting on laws about foster care while paying people to sell them. She looked at Sloane. I'll tell everyone what I saw, as many times as they need to hear it. He doesn't get to walk away. Grace stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Charlotte immediately adjusted her hold, gentler, protective. What happens to us after, Charlotte asked. After the trial, after everything. Sloane thought about that question. About 47 kids who'd been rescued from Margaret's houses. About 127 total across 6 states. About the 63 who were still missing. We build something better, Sloane said finally. A system that actually works. Where kids like us don't have to wait 23 months hoping someone notices. Where we don't have to gather evidence ourselves because the adults who are supposed to protect us are the ones hurting us. She pulled out the St. Christopher medal Reed had given her, let it catch the light. We make sure no one else has to do what we did. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in strategic warfare. Sloane didn't sleep much. Didn't need to. Her mind was working too fast, processing variables, calculating outcomes, planning 3 moves ahead. Brennan initially wanted to keep Sloane and the other witnesses isolated, protected. hidden from the media circus that was already descending on Wyoming. Absolutely not, Sloan said when Brennan explained the plan. They were in a conference room at the FBI field office. Brennan Reed Bishop and two other agents whose names Sloan hadn't bothered to learn. Sloan, you're a 13-year-old child witness in a federal trafficking case, Brennan said carefully. The media will. The media will do exactly what we want them to do if we control the narrative. Sloan spread her maps and notes across the table. Right now, Vale's defense team is building a strategy. They're going to paint this as a conspiracy. Political enemies, disgruntled foster children manipulated by a motorcycle gang. She looked up at Brennan. We can't let that narrative take root. We need to get ahead of it. By doing what? By letting me speak. Brennan shook her head. We can't put you in front of cameras. Your testimony needs to be pristine for trial. Any inconsistencies, I'm not talking about press conferences. Sloan pulled out her phone. I'm talking about documentation, a video diary, me explaining exactly what I experienced, what I saw, what I recorded, released publicly so Vale can't claim we're hiding evidence or manipulating facts. Reed leaned forward. You want to create a public record before the trial. I want to make it impossible for Vale's team to argue that we're lying. Sloan's voice was firm. Every detail I share publicly becomes something they have to address. Every piece of evidence I describe becomes something they have to explain. She looked at Brennan. You're worried about protecting the case. I'm worried about protecting the truth. Those aren't the same thing. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. If you do this wrong, you could tank the entire prosecution. Then help me do it right. They filmed for 3 days, not continuous. Sloan would talk for an hour, then rest, review footage, make adjustments, talk again. She explained exactly what life at Margaret's had been like. The moldy bread, the basement, the paddle with holes drilled in it, Lucas dying at 10 years old while Margaret claimed natural causes. She described finding the phone, the 6 months of gathering evidence, the strategy of becoming invisible so adults would talk around her like she was furniture. She played excerpts from the recordings. Not all of them, just enough to prove they existed, just enough to make it clear that this wasn't fabrication. And she talked about Vale. He knew, Sloan said, looking directly into the camera. He knew children were being sold. He knew we were being starved, and he didn't just ignore it. He facilitated it. He profited from it. She paused. Miss Margaret used to tell us that nobody cares about foster kids, that we're invisible, disposable, that we could scream all we want and no one would listen. Sloan leaned closer. She was wrong. You're listening now, all of you, and I'm going to make sure you never stop listening. The videos went viral immediately, not through Steel Riders this time, through every major news outlet simultaneously, through social media, through the millions of people who watched a 71-pound girl speak truth to power and felt something fundamental shift in their understanding of the world. Within 48 hours, Vale's approval rating dropped 37 points. Within 72 hours, 3 members of his staff resigned. Within a week, his own party was calling for his resignation. But Vale didn't resign. He doubled down. His defense team released a statement claiming Sloan was a troubled youth with a history of behavioral problems, that she'd been coached by radical activists, that her testimony was unreliable at best, fabricated at worst. They tried to dig up dirt on Reed, on Bishop, on the Steel Riders. They found nothing that mattered. What they didn't expect was Charlotte. The 15-year-old who'd spent 5 years at Margaret's posted her own video. 45 minutes of testimony unedited, describing in meticulous detail what life in the foster system had been like for her. Then came Sarah from the second house. Then 3 kids from Colorado. Then a 12-year-old from Montana who described being sold to a buyer in Nevada and escaping 2 years later. Within 2 weeks, there were 63 video testimonies from survivors. 63 voices saying the same thing. This happened. This was real. And Harrison Vale knew. The trial began 7 weeks after Vale's arrest. Senator Harrison Vale was charged with 17 counts of child trafficking, 12 counts of conspiracy, 8 counts of obstruction of justice, and 3 counts of accessory to murder for the children who died under Margaret's care. The prosecution had mountains of evidence, financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from 47 different witnesses, But everyone knew the case would live or die on one moment Sloane's testimony. She walked into that federal courtroom on day 12 wearing clothes that actually fit for the first time in 23 months. She gained 22 pounds since the rescue, 93 pounds now. Her cheeks had filled out, her shoulders had straightened, but her eyes were still ancient. She sat across from the man who'd discussed her death like it was a business decision, and she didn't flinch. The defense attorney was a woman in her 50s, expensive suit, cold eyes, the kind of lawyer who made a career defending powerful men who did terrible things. Miss Thatcher, she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy, say, "You've been through quite an ordeal, haven't you?" "Yes. You were placed in foster care after your mother died, is that correct?" "Yes." "And you were angry about that, angry at the system, angry at the adults who couldn't save your mother, angry at the world." Sloane's expression didn't change. "I was grief-stricken. That's not the same thing. But you acted out. You had behavioral issues. Your caseworker's notes indicate—" "My caseworker was David Thornton, Margaret's nephew, the man who helped her falsify death certificates and bury complaints." Sloane's voice was steady. "So yes, his notes say I had behavioral issues, because that's what he was paid to write." The attorney's jaw tightened. "Miss Thatcher, you recorded conversations without permission. You spied on adults. You stole a phone from your foster mother's drawer. These aren't the actions of a stable, truthful person. These are the actions of a survivor." Sloane leaned forward slightly. "You're right. I recorded conversations without permission. Because the adults having those conversations were discussing how to sell children. I stole a phone. Because I needed proof. Because I'd already tried telling the truth and was locked in a basement for 6 days." She paused. "You want to talk about stability? I was 13 years old. I weighed 71 pounds. I was being starved while my foster mother collected $3,800 a month that was supposed to feed me. I watched my friend Lucas die in a basement and was told it was natural causes." Sloane's voice was rising now, but not with emotion, with controlled intensity. "So yes, I became unstable. I became paranoid. I became someone who trusted recordings more than people, because the people who were supposed to protect me were selling me." The courtroom was silent. "And what do you hope to accomplish with this testimony?" the attorney asked, trying to regain control. "What's your agenda here?" Sloane looked directly at Vale. The senator wouldn't meet her eyes. "I hope he goes to prison. I hope he never hurts another child. And I hope every kid in the foster system right now sees this trial and knows that their voice matters." She turned back to the attorney. "That even when nobody listens, they should keep talking. Because eventually someone will. But you have an agenda. You're working with a motorcycle gang. I'm working with people who saved my life when the system failed me." Sloane's voice cut like a blade. "The Steel Riders responded to a 13-year-old girl eating a stolen burger faster than Child Protective Services responded to 8 months of reports about Margaret Thornton." She leaned forward. "So yes, I have an agenda. I want to burn down every piece of the system that made this possible, starting with the man who sat in the United States Senate writing foster care policy while buying children." The attorney tried several more angles, tried to paint Sloane as coached, manipulated, unstable, but every attack bounced off. Sloane had spent 6 months surviving Margaret Thornton. A defense attorney was nothing compared to that. Finally, the attorney made a mistake. "Miss Thatcher, you claim Senator Vale knew about the trafficking, but you were just one child among 47. Why would he even know your name?" Sloane smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Because 3 months before I escaped, he asked Margaret if I was a problem. If I'd been asking too many questions. Would you like me to play that recording for the court?" The attorney's face went pale. We've already heard. You asked why he'd know my name. I'm telling you, he knew my name. He knew I was asking questions. And he and Margaret discussed how to handle me." Sloane's voice dropped. "The conclusion they reached that I was a 70-pound kid, that nobody listens to foster kids anyway, that I wasn't a threat." She looked at the jury. Senator Vale asked what a 70-pound girl could do. Long pause. "I've spent the last 7 weeks showing him." The jury deliberated for 6 hours, not long considering the complexity of the case, but every minute felt like an eternity. Sloan sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, Reed on one side, Charlotte on the other. Grace had fallen asleep with her head on Sloan's lap. "What happens if he gets off?" Charlotte asked quietly. "He won't." "But what if he does?" Sloan was quiet for a moment. "Then we find another way. We don't stop. We never stop." The bailiff came out at 6:47 p.m. "We have a verdict." They filed back into the courtroom. Vale sat at the defense table, his expensive suit perfectly pressed his face, a mask of confident calm. That mask cracked when the jury foreman stood up. "On the charge of child trafficking in the first degree, how do you find guilty? On the charge of conspiracy to commit human trafficking, guilty, 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 guilty on all counts." Vale's face went from confident to shocked to devastated in the span of 30 seconds. The judge's voice was hard as granite when she delivered the sentence. "Harrison Vale, you are hereby sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. You used your position of power to exploit the most vulnerable members of our society. You betrayed the trust placed in you by millions of Americans. And you did it for money." She paused. "I hope you spend every day of the rest of your life thinking about the children you destroyed." The gavel came down. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras everywhere, microphones thrust toward anyone who emerged. Brennan held a press conference on the courthouse steps, announced the continued investigation into the broader trafficking network, 37 locations across 6 states, over 200 children recovered, 63 still missing and actively being traced. But the real moment happened away from the cameras. Reed found Sloan sitting alone on a bench 2 blocks from the courthouse, away from the chaos. "You okay?" Sloan nodded. "Yeah, just processing." "You did good in there. Better than good. You destroyed their entire defense." "It wasn't about destroying them." Sloan looked up at him. "It was about making sure it meant something. Lucas, Kayla, the others who didn't survive. I needed them to matter." Reed sat down beside him. "They matter. You made sure of it." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Reed's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His expression shifted. "What?" Sloan asked. "It's Brennan." He was reading quickly. "The task force. They've been following Vale's financial connections, the buyer network." And Reed looked at her. "They found them, all 63, alive." Sloan stopped breathing. "All of them. Every single one, 14 states, 3 countries. Vale's network led them to buyers we never would have found otherwise. It's the largest recovery operation in trafficking history." He showed her the screen. Photos, names, faces of children who'd been missing for years. "They're bringing them home, Sloan, all of them." Sloan felt something break open in her chest. Not pain, something else. Something that had been locked tight for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like. Hope. She put her face in her hands and sobbed. Not quiet tears, not the suppressed crying of someone who couldn't afford to show weakness, but open, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Reed didn't try to stop her, didn't tell her it was okay, just sat there and let her feel it. All of it. The relief and the grief and the overwhelming weight of knowing that every single child had been found. When she finally looked up, her face was streaked with tears. "We got them," she whispered. "We actually got them all." "You got them," Reed said quietly. "This was always your operation. From the moment you stole that burger, you saved 190 children, Sloan. You're 15 years old and you changed the world." Sloan shook her head. "I'm not 15 yet. Still 13. For 2 more weeks. Then what?" Sloan looked at the saint. Christopher medal in her palm. Jackson's medal. The promise Reed had kept. "Then we make sure it never happens again." 14 months later, everything had changed. Sloan Catherine Thatcher stood in front of a mirror in Sarah and Tom Winter's house, barely recognizing herself. 15 years old now. 5'4", 108 pounds. Healthy weight for her height and age for the first time in years. Her hair had grown out thick and dark. Her face had filled out. She looked like a different person entirely, but her eyes were the same. Still gray, still fierce, still ancient in a way that no amount of healing would ever fully erase. "You ready?" Charlotte called from downstairs. "Almost." Sloan adjusted the leather vest she was wearing. Not a full steel rider's patch. She was too young for that. but an honorary vest, something that marked her as protected, as family. Today was the anniversary, 1 year since the night Reed had found her behind a dumpster. 1 year since everything changed. The Steel Riders were doing a memorial ride, 190 motorcycles rolling through Cedar Falls, past the diner where it all began, past the house on rural Route 7 that had been demolished and replaced with a community garden, past the courthouse where Harrison Vale had been sentenced, and ending at the garden where a bronze plaque had been installed in memory of the children who hadn't survived. 4 names were etched into the granite base: Lucas, Kayla, 2 others whose bodies had been found buried behind Margaret's second property. Sloan walked downstairs. Sarah was waiting in the kitchen, coffee in hand. "Big day," Sarah said. "Yeah." Sarah and Tom had adopted Sloan 6 months ago. The paperwork had taken forever, but finally it was official. Sloan Catherine Thatcher Winters. Now, a family, a real one. Charlotte had been adopted by Doc Martinez and his wife. She lived 20 minutes away, visited every weekend, called Sloan her sister more often than not. Grace had gone to a family in Montana. Sweet people who sent updates monthly. Photos of Grace smiling, actually smiling, playing with a dog, going to school, being a kid. Margaret Thornton had died in prison 3 months after her sentencing. Heart attack, the official report said, but everyone who knew her suspected something else. The other inmates had discovered what she'd done to children. Prison justice was brutal and permanent. Sloan hadn't mourned her. The motorcycles started arriving at 9 a.m. 190 bikes, more than the original 189. They'd added Sloan to the count, the girl who'd started it all. Reed pulled up on his bike. He looked older than he had a year ago. The gray in his beard more pronounced, but his eyes were lighter somehow, like helping Sloan had healed something in him that had been broken since Jackson died. "You riding with me?" Reed asked. Actually, Sloan walked to a bike parked in the driveway, a smaller Harley, red and chrome. "I'm riding my own." Reed's eyebrows rose. "Bishop gave it to me for my 15th birthday. Taught me to ride over the summer." Sloan ran her hand along the handlebars. "Figured it was time." Reed smiled, pride and something like awe mixing in his expression. "Jackson would have loved you, you know. Would have thought you were the coolest person alive." Sloan felt her throat tighten. "I wish I could have met him." "Yeah, me too." They rode together, 190 strong, through Cedar Falls like a river of still and leather and purpose. People lined the streets, clapping, some crying. Everyone knew the story now. The 13-year-old girl who'd taken down a trafficking network. The motorcycle club that had mobilized across 6 states to save children. They stopped at the garden. Sloan walked to the plaque. Read the 4 names: Lucas, Kayla, the 2 others. She stood there for a long time thinking about the children who hadn't made it. The ones who'd been too young or too broken or just too unlucky. When she turned around, 189 bikers were standing in silence behind her, waiting. "I want to make a promise," Sloan said. Her voice carried across the garden. "To every foster kid in America, to every child who feels invisible, disposable, like screaming won't matter because nobody's listening." She paused. "I'm listening now. We're all listening now, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you're protected." She looked at the plaque. "These 4 names are the last ones. There won't be more. I won't allow it." Bishop stepped forward. "And tell them about Wolfwatch." Sloan nodded. "We're launching a program, partnership between the Steel Riders and Reformed Child Protective Services agencies nationwide. Every chapter will monitor local foster care systems, interview kids regularly, create safe reporting channels." She pulled out a card, laminated, official. "Every foster child in the system will get one of these. Direct hotline to Steel Riders chapters, 24/7. If you're in danger, you call. We respond. No bureaucracy, no waiting, no adults who might be part of the problem." Charlotte stepped up beside her. "I'm going to help train the responders. Teach them what warning signs look like. How to talk to kids who've been conditioned not to trust adults." Grace's voice came from the crowd, small but steady. She'd flown in from Montana for this. "And I'm going to visit schools, tell my story, show kids that survival is possible." One by one, other survivors stepped forward. Sarah from the second house, the 12-year-old from Montana, 3 kids from Colorado, 47 voices, all saying the same thing. We survived. We're here. And we're going to protect the ones who come after us. When Sloan finished speaking, the garden was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then all 189 bikers. Then the crowd of onlookers who'd gathered. The applause lasted 3 minutes. 2 weeks later, Sloan testified before Congress. The hearing was televised. C-SPAN carried it live. Millions of Americans watched a 15-year-old girl in a simple blue dress sit before the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services and dismantle their entire foster care oversight system. My name is Sloan Catherine Thatcher, she began. When I was 13 years old, I weighed 71 pounds and had no power, no voice, no protection. She paused. The system designed to protect me failed at every level. My caseworker was corrupt. The police ignored reports. The county officials were complicit. And the senator who oversaw foster care policy nationwide was running a trafficking network. She looked at the senators before her. Today I'm 15 years old. I weigh 108 pounds. And in the last 14 months, I've helped rescue 190 children from situations just like mine. Sloan leaned forward. I shouldn't have had to do that. A 13-year-old child shouldn't have to gather evidence for 6 months. Shouldn't have to plan a rescue operation. Shouldn't have to negotiate with hostage takers and testify in federal court. Her voice hardened, but I did, because the adults who were supposed to protect me were either hurting me or ignoring me or profiting from my suffering. She pulled out a document. This is the Wolfwatch Protocol, a comprehensive reform framework for foster care oversight, independent monitoring, direct reporting channels, trauma-informed response training, legal protections for whistleblowers. She set it on the table. You can implement it, or you can explain to your constituents why you chose not to. But either way, we're moving forward, with or without government support. One of the senators, an older woman from Texas, leaned into her microphone. Miss Thatcher, with all due respect, you're 15 years old. You don't have the authority to... I have the authority of experience, Sloan interrupted. I have the authority of 190 survivors who trust me to speak for them. I have the authority of millions of Americans who watched a 71-pound girl take down a senator and decided maybe children are worth listening to. She paused. What authority do you have? What have you done to protect foster children? Because from where I'm sitting, your oversight allowed Harrison Vale to traffic kids for 7 years while chairing this very committee. The room went silent. So yes, I'm 15, but I'm also the reason 190 children are alive today. What's your excuse? The hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, 3 senators had committed to supporting Wolfwatch funding. 2 had resigned under pressure from constituents calling in real time during the broadcast. And Sloan had become the face of a movement. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Wolfwatch had chapters in 43 states. Sloan spent her 16th birthday visiting a foster home in Oregon. Not investigating, not rescuing, just visiting. Talking to kids. Showing them the hotline card. Telling them they mattered. A girl pulled her aside after the group session. 14 years old. Thin, scared eyes. Does it work? The girl whispered. The hotline. If I call, will someone actually come? Sloan pulled out her phone. Showed the girl a video. Security camera footage from a Wolfwatch response 3 weeks earlier. A kid in Nevada had called. Reported abuse. Within 40 minutes, Steel Riders had arrived. Within 2 hours, the child was in protective custody and the foster parents were arrested. It works, Sloan said. I promise. The girl stared at the video. You promise. I promise, and I keep my promises. The girl nodded slowly. Then she did something unexpected. She hugged Sloan by held on tight. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on us. Sloan hugged her back. Never, I'm never giving up. That night, lying in bed at the hotel, Sloan got a text from Reed. Proud of you, kid. Jackson would be too. She looked at the St. Christopher medal on her nightstand. She wore it every day now, a reminder of the promise that started everything. She typed back, thank you for believing a 70-pound girl eating a stolen burger. Reed's response came immediately. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. Sloan smiled. Then she opened her laptop and started writing. The book had been Brennan's idea. Your story needs to be told properly, not just news clips and court testimony. The whole thing. So Sloan was writing it, every detail. From the moment her mother died to the congressional hearing. The moldy bread, the basement, the 6 months of gathering evidence, the night Reed found her, the rescue, the trial, everything. She was calling it Please Don't Call the Police, how a 70-pound girl brought down a senator. The publisher said it would be released next year. Proceeds going to Wolf Watch, to help more kids, to build more chapters, to create more safe reporting channels. Sloan wrote until 3 a.m. Then she closed the laptop and walked to the window. Somewhere out there, a child was suffering tonight, starving, being beaten, being sold. But somewhere else, a kid was holding a hotline card, knowing that if they called, someone would answer, someone would come, someone would believe them. The system was still broken in 1,000 ways, but it was better than it had been 14 months ago, and Sloan wasn't done fixing it. She thought about Margaret's words, nobody believes foster kids. You could scream all you want, and nobody would care. Sloan had proven her wrong. She'd screamed, and the whole country had listened. 190 children were alive because a 13-year-old girl had refused to be invisible, had refused to accept that her voice didn't matter, had spent 6 months gathering evidence and planning an operation and waiting for the right moment to act. Senator Harrison Vale had asked what a 70-pound girl could do. Sloan had shown him. She'd survived 23 months of hell. She'd documented a trafficking network. She'd orchestrated a rescue operation across 6 states. She'd negotiated with hostage takers. She'd testified before Congress. She'd launched a national reform movement. And she wasn't finished. Because somewhere tonight, another child was stealing food. Another kid was locked in a basement. Another girl was being told she didn't matter. And Sloan was going to find them. All of them, one by one, for as long as it took. She looked at her reflection in the window. 15 years old, 108 pounds, healthy, safe, loved, but still carrying those ancient eyes. Still remembering what it felt like to weigh 71 pounds and believe nobody cared. She would never forget, and she would never let anyone else feel that way again. Sloan picked up her phone and sent a message to the Wolf Watch group chat. 43 state chapters, thousands of volunteers, all waiting for the next call. Thank you for everything you're doing. Keep listening, keep responding, keep believing the kids who call. We're changing the system. One child at a time. The responses came flooding in, dozens of volunteers saying they were honored to be part of it, that Sloan had inspired them, that they'd keep fighting. Sloan smiled. Then she went back to her laptop and kept writing. Because her story wasn't just about surviving. It was about making sure no one else had to whisper those 8 words that had changed everything. Please don't call the police. Instead, kids would know they could call for help, could trust that someone would answer, could believe that their voice mattered, that they mattered. Sloan Catherine Thatcher had been 71 pounds of pure determination when this started. Now she was a warrior, a survivor, a voice for the voiceless, and she was just getting started. The night was quiet, the hotel room was safe, and somewhere 190 children were sleeping soundly because a girl who weighed 71 pounds had refused to disappear. Margaret had been wrong about everything. Foster kids weren't invisible. They were survivors. And when you gave them a voice, they could change the world. Sloan had proved it, and she was going to keep proving it for the rest of her life.